The silence in my apartment was different now. It wasn't the heavy, waiting silence of before, the one that pressed in on my eardrums and screamed that something was wrong. This was a clean silence, an empty silence. The kind of silence that exists after a storm has finally passed, leaving behind a world washed clean, even if it's strewn with wreckage. I could breathe in this silence. I could think. And in the weeks and months that followed the party, that's all I had left to do. Think. And slowly, piece by piece, learn how to live inside this new, quiet reality. The fallout, as I said, was extensive. It was like a bomb had gone off in the center of our shared social universe, and the shockwaves just kept traveling outward, finding new targets, new consequences I hadn't even considered in my meticulous planning. The first wave was the immediate digital shrapnel. My phone, which I had turned off before the party, lit up like a war zone when I finally gathered the courage to switch it back on 2 days later. It wasn't just the number of notifications, hundreds of texts, missed calls, social media tags. It was the sheer, undiluted intensity of them. They were a chaotic symphony of shock, of outrage, of desperate requests for confirmation, and a very few, of quiet, simple support. There were messages from people I hadn't spoken to since college, saying they'd seen the video. The video. Of course, there was a video. In this age, there's always a video. Someone at the party, probably a colleague of Liam's, had filmed the entire thing on their phone. My speech, the flickering of the screen, the gasps, Liam's shouted denial. It was all there, a little shaky, a little muffled, but perfectly damningly clear. It had been shared in private messages, posted in semi-private groups, and from there, it had metastasized. It was out of my control, a digital ghost I could never catch. Part of me was horrified. This was my private pain, my calculated revenge, now become public spectacle for distant acquaintances and outright strangers to gawk at over their morning coffee. But another, colder part of me acknowledged that this was part of the plan, wasn't it? A public, undeniable moment. I had just underestimated the meaning of public. I had thought it was our 50 closest friends and family. The internet had a different, vaster definition. The messages from our mutual friends were the hardest to read. They were a messy tapestry of guilt and fury. Many were apologetic. "I'm so sorry, Maya, I had no idea. We never would have stood by if we'd known. Those snakes, I can't believe it." Their anger was a mirror of my own, but it felt different coming from them. It was fresher, more shocked. Mine was a worn, familiar tool I had been carrying for months. Theirs was a new, shiny weapon, and they were swinging it with the vigor of the newly betrayed. It was validating, of course, to have my reality confirmed so vehemently by the outside world. But it was also exhausting. Each message was a little hook pulling me back into the drama, forcing me to relive it through their eyes, to accept their pity or their rage. I found I didn't have the energy for either. Then there were the messages about Liam and Chloe. The reports trickled in from various sources, painting a picture of a collapse as total as my own, but without the foundation of righteousness to build upon. Liam, I was told by a still loyal friend from his office, had been called into HR the Monday after the party. The video had reached his boss, a stern woman in her 50s who valued corporate image above all else. They didn't fire him for having an affair, of course. They used the standard sterile language of corporate euthanasia. His position was being eliminated due to a restructuring, and they were offering him a generous severance package contingent on his immediate and quiet departure. It was a polite execution. His professional reputation, the one he'd spent a decade building, was ash. The friend said Liam had looked shattered, emptied out, as he cleaned out his desk under the silent, pitying stares of his colleagues. Chloe's ruin was more social, but no less complete. She was eviscerated online. Her Instagram, once a curated gallery of her perfect life, brunch, sunsets, designer coffee, became a graveyard. Every old post was flooded with comments. Old photos of us together, which she had never deleted, were now littered with crying, laughing emojis and words like traitor and fake friend. Her workplace, a trendy marketing firm, was tagged in countless posts. I heard through the grapevine, a grapevine that seemed dedicated solely to broadcasting their downfall, that she was strongly encouraged to take a leave of absence. The scrutiny was too much. The brand of the company couldn't be associated with the main character of a viral betrayal scandal. The most poignant, and in a strange way, the most painful piece of information came from my mother. She had, after her initial tears of betrayal on my behalf, reached out to Liam's mother. They had never been close, but they'd shared a cordial, grandmotherly-in-waiting relationship for years. The conversation was brief and agonizing. Liam's mother was devastated, not just by his actions, but by the method of their exposure. She was ashamed, heartbroken, and furious with me for the public spectacle. "She said you didn't have to do it like that, Maya," my mother told me, her voice soft with a pain that wasn't hers to carry. "She said you could have come to her. You could have handled it privately. You humiliated her son in front of the whole world." I remember the cold wash of that accusation. For a moment it stuck. Had I been too cruel? Had I become the monster in his mother's story? But then the memory of the hotel booking, the one for our anniversary, flashed in my mind. The precise surgical cruelty of that. I looked at my mother and said, "She raised a son who would do that, Mom. Her humiliation is her own to manage." It was a harsh thing to say, but it was the truth that kept me from drowning in their narrative. This was the consequence of their actions, not mine. I was just the one who opened the curtain. The most telling report, and the one that brought me the most cold satisfaction, was that Liam and Chloe had tried to make a go of it. Thrown together in their shared exile, the secret world they had so cherished was now their only reality. And reality, it turned out, was a poor substitute for fantasy. A friend of a friend saw them at a movie theater in a different part of town, weeks after the party. They weren't holding hands. They weren't laughing. They were sitting stiffly, several inches apart on the seats, not looking at each other, their postures screaming of a profound, irreparable awkwardness. The report was that it didn't last more than a few weeks. The foundation of lies, as I knew it would, could not support the weight of a real, day-to-day relationship. The thrill was gone, replaced only by the bitter ashes of their shared disgrace and the ghost of me standing between them. They had nothing in common but their secret, and once the secret was gone, they were just two people who had burned down their lives for a fleeting, tawdry excitement. As for me, I was left with the pieces. The initial surge of power, the clean high of victory, faded after a few days, leaving behind a hollowed-out landscape of grief. The revenge had been a project, a mission that gave structure to my days and purpose to my pain. Now that it was accomplished, the pain was still there, vast and unoccupied. I had to learn how to just sit with it. The first few weeks were the worst. I'd wake up in the morning, and for one blissful second, the world was normal. And then the memory would crash down on me, a physical weight on my chest. The betrayal. The lies, the party. The video. It was a cycle of nausea and tears. I'd walk through the grocery store and see a brand of pasta sauce Liam liked, and my eyes would well up. I'd hear a song we'd dance to in our kitchen, and I'd have to pull the car over because I was crying too hard to see the road. I was grieving for a future that had been stolen. The 5-year plan we'd sketched out, the dog we were going to get, the trip to Japan we were saving for, the vague, shimmering idea of children. It was all gone, and it wasn't just gone. It was retroactively poisoned. Every happy memory from those 5 years was now suspect. Was he thinking of her then? Was he already lying to me that day? The past was no longer a safe country I could visit. It was a minefield. I grieved for Chloe with a different, more complex kind of sorrow. Losing a romantic partner is one kind of heartbreak. Losing a best friend, a sister, is another. It was an amputation. There were 1,000 tiny moments in a day when I would reach for my phone to text her a funny observation, or to ask her advice on what to wear, or just to hear her voice. The absence was a phantom limb, aching for something that was no longer there. The depth of her betrayal was a puzzle I couldn't stop turning over in my mind. How could she sit across from me, listening to my fears about Liam growing distant, all while she was the reason for it? How could she offer me comfort with the same hands that were dismantling my life? The psychological gymnastics required were so vast, so pathological that I couldn't fathom it. It was easier to understand Liam's betrayal in a way. It was cliché, but it made a brutal sense. But Chloe's? Hers was a deeper, more intimate violation. I knew I couldn't do it alone. The silence of the apartment, once clean, began to feel like isolation. The thoughts in my head were starting to spiral, going down dark paths of self-blame. Was I not enough? Was I too boring? Too needy? Maybe if I had been more attentive, more fun, more something. This was the poison of betrayal, the part that lingers long after the betrayers have left the scene. It makes you doubt your own worth. So I did something I had never done before. I found a therapist. Dr. Evans was a woman in her late 50s with kind eyes and a calm, steady voice. that felt like an anchor in my churning sea of emotions. The first session, I just cried. I cried for the full 50 minutes, a messy, snotty, unproductive cry. She just sat there, handing me tissues, her presence a silent permission to fall apart. In the sessions that followed, we began to unpack the wreckage. She gave me the language for what I was feeling. The hypervigilance, the mood swings, the intrusive thoughts. It was all part of post-traumatic stress. Betrayal trauma, she called it. Knowing it had a name, that it was a recognized psychological response and not just me being weak, was the first step toward taking its power away. We talked a lot about the revenge. I was ashamed to tell her at first, fearing her professional judgment. But when I laid it all out, the keylogger, the party, the public exposure, she didn't flinch. She didn't condone it, but she didn't condemn it either. She simply asked, "What did you hope it would accomplish?" I thought about it for a long time. I wanted them to feel a fraction of the powerlessness they made me feel, I finally said. I wanted the outside world to see them as I saw them. I wanted the truth to be the last, loudest word. And did it work? She asked. I thought of Liam's shattered face, of Chloe's colorless one. I thought of the video circulating endlessly. Yes, I whispered. It worked. Then the question now, Dr. Evans said gently, is not whether it was right or wrong. The question is, what do you do with the power you took back? You wanted to stop feeling like a victim. So don't build your new identity around being an avenger. What else are you? It was the hardest question I'd ever been asked. For months, my entire identity had been defined in relation to them. Liam's betrayed girlfriend, Chloe's wronged best friend, the architect of their ruin. Who was I without them? The process of finding out was slow, and it was built in the smallest of actions. It started with cleaning out the apartment. I boxed up all of Liam's things that he'd never come back for. His favorite mug, the books on his side of the bed, the sweatshirt he'd left on a chair. I didn't burn them or destroy them in a fit of rage. I simply packed them away and donated them to a thrift store. It was a quiet, deliberate act of removal. I rearranged the furniture. I bought new sheets in a color he would have hated, a deep, vibrant emerald green. I was reclaiming my space, inch by inch. I had to financially untangle myself from the life we'd built. We had a shared bank account for household expenses. I went to the bank, closed it, and opened a new one in my name only. The act of sitting in that sterile office, signing the papers, felt more significant than any wedding vow I'd ever imagined. It was a vow to myself. I am my own security. I started saying yes to things, even when every fiber of my being wanted to say no and hide under the emerald green sheets. When a coworker I barely knew invited me to a trivia night, I went. I was quiet for most of the night, my social muscles atrophied and weak, but I went. I didn't flinch when a love song came on the bar's speakers. It was a small victory. I started going to a yoga class on Saturday mornings. The first time, I spent most of the hour fighting back tears in child's pose, the instructor's soothing voice feeling like a mockery of my churning insides. But I kept going. And one week, about 2 months in, I realized I had made it through the entire class without once thinking about Liam or Chloe. My mind had been fully, peacefully, occupied with the stretch in my hamstrings and the rhythm of my breath. It felt like a miracle. I had to learn how to trust again, and Dr. Evans was firm that the first person I had to learn to trust was myself. Your intuition was screaming at you for months, she reminded me, and you listened eventually. You gathered data. You confirmed your reality. That is the opposite of crazy. That is the epitome of sanity. Trust that version of you. So I started practicing. If I had a gut feeling about something small, like a shortcut on my drive to work, I took it. If I felt a person was being disingenuous, I allowed myself to feel that, to create a little distance without guilt. I was relearning the language of my own instincts, a language I had been taught to ignore. My revenge didn't bring Liam back. It didn't make the pain go away. But it did something else, something more profound and lasting. It gave me my agency back. In a situation where they had made me feel powerless, small, and foolish, a pawn in their secret game, I had taken control of the narrative. I had become the author of the final chapter. I showed them, and more importantly, I showed myself, that I was not the victim they thought I was. I was a force, a reckoning. And that knowledge, that I possessed a core of steel I never knew existed, became the new foundation of my life. It was stronger than any foundation built on the shifting sand of another person's love. So, what's the moral of this story? Is it that revenge is sweet? In the moment, watching them squirm, seeing the masks ripped from their faces, yes, there was a bitter sweetness to it. It was a sugar rush of justice, intense and fleeting. But the aftertaste was complex. It didn't fill the hollow spaces they left behind. The real lesson, the one that has stayed with me and reshaped me, is so much deeper. The lesson is about trust. It's about learning to trust the quiet voice inside you that knows the truth long before your mind has gathered the evidence to prove it. We are taught, especially as women, to be polite, to be understanding, to give the benefit of the doubt. We are taught that to be suspicious is to be cynical, to be jealous is to be unattractive. But I learned that there is a vast, crucial difference between paranoia and intuition. Paranoia is a frantic, baseless fear. Intuition is your subconscious mind, which is a supercomputer of pattern recognition, quietly presenting you with its findings. Those whispers I felt? They were my intuition handing me reports. The cracks I saw? They were the data points. Don't let anyone, ever, make you feel crazy for seeing the cracks in their facade. Your primary loyalty is not to their comfort. It is to your own reality. The lesson is about strength. We have a cultural script for strength in the face of betrayal. It's one of quiet dignity, of turning the other cheek, of graceful forgiveness. And for some, that is a valid path. But it is not the only path. Strength can also look like a righteous roar. It can look like setting a boundary so fierce, so absolute, that those who betray you are not just asked to leave, but are shown the door in a way that ensures they can never, ever find their way back. My revenge was my boundary. It was my way of screaming to the universe, "You do not get to do this to me and walk away unscathed. You do not get to live in your beautiful, peaceful lie while I am left to drown in the ugly, chaotic truth you created." My revenge was the wall I built around the ruins of my old self to protect the new one struggling to grow. And finally, the lesson is about closure. We talk about closure as if it's a tangible thing we can get from someone else. We wait for the perfect apology, the moment of karmic justice, the sign from the universe that it's okay to move on. But closure isn't something you receive. It's something you build. It's a house you construct for your spirit to live in after the storm has passed. For me, closure wasn't found in forgetting or in passive moving on. It was built actively with my own two hands. It was built from facing the betrayal head-on, dragging it out of the shadows, and exposing it to the light for the ugly, withering thing it was. I built my closure from the rubble of their lies, and because I built it myself, I know its foundation is solid. I know every room. I know it can shelter me. It's been a year now. The storm is a memory. The silence in my apartment is my friend. I am rebuilding, and my life for the first time in a long time feels truly, completely my own. The dreams are different now. They're not about a shared future with a man I can't trust, but about the woman I am becoming. They're about the book I want to write, the solo trip I'm planning to take, the quiet joy of a Saturday morning with no plans and no one to answer to. The sharp, stabbing pain has softened into a dull ache, a scar that twinges when the weather changes but no longer bleeds. They tried to break me. They took my love, my friendship, my trust, and they shattered it on the floor of their own selfishness. But in the end, all they did was show me how strong I really am. They forced me to find a version of myself I never would have met in the safe, comfortable life I had before. They thought they were taking everything from me, but they accidentally gave me the greatest gift, the unshakable knowledge of my own resilience. And that, I have come to understand, is the greatest and most lasting revenge of all. It's the revenge that doesn't harm them but transforms you. It's the revenge that turns your pain into power, and your survival into your greatest strength.